All right, guys, I just got back from watching Deadpool, a movie that I have been anticipating for many years. Never thought it would actually get made. But yes, indeed, it is made. I'm going to talk about it here in my quick review. Now, the way I'm going to structure this video is I'm not going to get into any big spoilers until later in the video, and I will give you a warning before I get into the major spoilers, okay? So right now, the basics is this, okay? First and foremost, I want to let everybody know who has not seen the film yet. This is an R-rated superhero movie, but they exploit that R rating to the absolute max. This is not a kid's movie. Not only is there tons and tons of profanity, and I mean like every other word is a profane word. Literally, from like almost every character, especially from Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson. But there's a sex scene in the film, which again, I'm not going to go into details, but there are sex scenes in this movie, and we're not talking about like the Tony Scott dimly lit like bedroom romantic sex scenes. I'm talking about like almost to the point where it's like porn, except you don't really see, well, you see something, but you don't see everything. It was weird because I went to go see it at the 8 o'clock showing in my local theater here, one of the big theaters that we have, and there were little kids there, and I mean little kids. I mean, there was like a 4-year-old girl, had to be 4 or 5 years old, and I'm not one of those people that's up for censorship. I'm really not. I'm totally anti-censorship, but I don't feel that a 4-year-old girl should see a film that's this violent, because it's also overly violent, too. That's the other thing I want to talk about, too. Overly violent. I would say it's even more violent than the comics. Like, it really is. And overly sexual and lots of profanity. So I'm just letting you know now, lots of cursing. If you are a fan of Deadpool, if you're familiar with the comics, this is the film you need to see. Now, obviously, Deadpool started out as a villain way, way back in the day. That's really not the story they go for here, even though they kind of semi-did that with the X-Men movie. I saw literally no ties to that movie at all. So people who are out there worried that this is going to be a sequel to the Wolverine movie, the X-Men Wolverine film with Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, it doesn't even fit whatsoever. However, the film does take place in the X-Men universe. This movie is a part of the X-Men continuity. I'm not entirely sure as to where it fits, if it's after Days of Futures Past or if it's in between like X2 and X3. As you saw by the trailers, Colossus is in this film, and he's awesome in this movie, and it does fit in. And Professor Xavier's mentioned. There's all kinds of. First of all, again, if you're a fan of Deadpool, the comics, you know what to expect. Okay, everything that Deadpool does in the comic, he does in the film. They break the fourth wall. There's a lot of sex jokes. I mean, a lot, like even more than the comics. There's tons of violence. He's trash-talking all of his enemies. I had a great time watching this movie, all right? This is the most entertaining comic book movie that I have seen in a long time. I was thinking about it as I was watching, and I had to go back and see it again. Because when I walked out of the theater, I said, okay, this is now my favorite comic book movie. Like, it really is my favorite. But then I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? I only saw it once. I have to see it more. But right now, I definitely want to see this movie again. It's such a great film. An amazing. It's so different from everything else. Like a lot of people feel that the MCU is becoming very homogenized lately. This film, even though it's not part of the MCU, it's part of the Fox X-Men cinematic universe or whatever you call it, because it ties in with the X-Men movies. Fox has made up for Fantastic Four. I know a lot of people crucified Fox when Fantastic Four came out last year. This film, complete opposite. The characters were done correctly. They even had a cameo appearance by a really lesser-known character. I had to actually ask about this. I wasn't even familiar with the character as much as I thought I was. And there's references to other stuff in the comics and things like that. Just, again, spoiler-free version of this review. The movie goes by very quickly. It's very well paced, and it's also non-linear. The story kind of hops back and forth between different times, but it's not to the point where you're confused about anything. It essentially starts out with a big action piece, and then Deadpool kind of says, okay, well, how do we get here? And then he goes back, which I think was very well done. I thought it didn't lose the audience whatsoever. The audience was hooked for the whole thing. Ryan Reynolds was born to play Deadpool. I didn't know if he could pull it off, but he was just absolutely fantastic as Deadpool. I mean, if you've seen the advertisements for the film and the promotional material, you know that he's got this character down, and in the film, he really does. I felt, in my opinion, that Morena Baccarin playing Vanessa Carlyle, I felt she was a little wooden. Those are kind of my flaws here. Not the best performance I've ever seen. Also, Ajax in the film I thought was a little bit, I guess, a little bit not too interesting. He was a decent villain, a decent first villain, but he wasn't very dimensional at all. He was extremely one-dimensional, I felt. I didn't really like that part of it, but I really enjoyed the appearance, of course, of Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Peter Rasputin Colossus. They were just so funny, and they were kind of Deadpool's, like, they had a love-hate relationship with Deadpool. But I'm not going to get into that right now because that would spoil the movie. We'll talk more about that later. Also, I felt Gina Carano, hot as ever as Angel Dust. And, of course, she's a former MMA fighter, and there's a scene where she puts an MMA move on somebody, and I'm like, great, there you go. They always do that. Like, when The Rock's in a movie, he has to do the rock bottom. Really enjoyed the film. Definitely go out there and see it. Again, not a movie for kids, but this is a completely different kind of comic book movie. I've never seen a movie like this. The best comparison I can tell you is probably Kick-Ass, in that it's pretty much 80% comedy, over-the-top violence, like Deadpool. I mean, it pretty much is Deadpool. It pretty much is Deadpool. And it's interesting to me because, as far as I know, the film was directed by Tim Miller. And as far as I know, Tim Miller hasn't really done too much. Like, as far as I know, this is the first full direction he's ever done, like directing a full movie. He worked on the second Thor movie, a few other pieces here and there. But this is his directorial debut. And I felt that he did a fantastic job. I felt that the special effects were really, really good. I was very impressed because I was worried it was going to turn into this, like, overly CGI mumbled mess, like how that Iron Man versus Hulk scene was in Age of Ultron, which has not aged well. I don't think that scene, the whole movie has not aged very well, but I don't think that scene looks that good anymore. It looks very cartoony. In this film, I thought everything was shot very well, and I thought it had very good special effects, very good sound engineering as well. Just a very well-made movie. And I hope they make a sequel. So that's going to do it for the non-spoiler part. I'm letting you know right now we are going to talk about spoilers. So if you have not seen the film, go ahead and click off. Thank you for supporting Geekdom 101 as always. And let's talk about some spoilers. Okay, what I liked and didn't like. First of all, the fight scenes are awesome. The opening sequence with Deadpool just shredding guys with guns and with his katana or his samurai swords or whatever was just really, really good. We've seen this stuff before. It has become a bit of a trope in modern movies where we're seeing kind of the over-the-top violence where you'll see a guy get shot and his brain matter and blood will leak everywhere. Kill Bill did it. Django Unchained did it. You know, even Kick-Ass kind of did the over-the-top thing too. But it works for Deadpool. It really worked for Deadpool. Of course, Wade Wilson, you know, played by Ryan Reynolds, like I said earlier, he meets Vanessa. And Vanessa Carlyle is Copycat from the Marvel Comics. So I'm wondering if she's going to become Copycat later on in the sequel or whatever. I'm curious. But in this movie, she's not Copycat. She's basically a hooker. And they hook up. They have a lot of chemistry. And that kind of kicks off like the flashback. Because the film starts with essentially Deadpool chasing Ajax, and then it cuts back to his origin, which is this, and then he meets a guy who he calls Agent Smith. Very, very funny guy. He was played by Jed Reese, and he meets him at a bar, at Weasel's Bar, and he tells him, you know, because what happens is Wade Wilson gets cancer, and he's pretty much got terminal cancer, and this guy, Jed Reese, says, well, we can cure your cancer. Turns out that it's a ruse to get him into essentially what was the Weapon X program. They didn't actually call it the Weapon X program. At least I didn't hear it. If I'm wrong, let me know down below. Maybe I missed something. They didn't call it the Weapon X program, but that's pretty much what it is. He gets in there, and Ajax, of course, enhances him and gives him healing factor. And the idea was that the Weapon X program creates mutants and then ships them off and sells them to various people around the world. Different take on this. I wonder where they're going to go with it, you know, but still. So he goes there. He's obviously pissed because Ajax ruined his face, and the whole plot of the movie is Deadpool chasing Ajax. That's the whole story. And then, of course, he gets stopped by Colossus and by Negasonic Teenage Warhead, because what happens is Colossus is trying to recruit him to join the X-Men. He's like, we want you to come see the professor, blah, blah, blah. And Negasonic is pretty much a trainee. And essentially Deadpool's like, fuck this, I want my revenge. You know, it's a revenge story, essentially. And I love the fact that they showed the school for the gifted youngsters, the Xavier school, but they never showed anybody else but these two characters. And it's funny because later on in the film, Deadpool says, I wonder why there's no more X-Men here. Maybe the studio couldn't afford any more cameos. Like, little shit like that, man, makes this fucking movie awesome. Just, I love it. He's talking to the camera, and essentially the whole film, like I said, is him chasing Ajax. But of course, Ajax finds out from Weasel, and when he goes to the bar, not from Weasel, but he basically finds a picture that Weasel has of Deadpool's girlfriend, kidnaps her, and then it essentially becomes like a kind of a by the numbers plot. That's the thing about the film, is that the plot is very by the numbers. It's a revenge story. It's damsel in distress. They're using these tropes, the Steven Seagal tropes. They're using these tropes, but the way the execution is, the characters, the fact that this movie's not afraid to be different. Deadpool was not afraid to be different, and it needed to be different in order for this character to get over, and I do believe the character will get over. I love the post-credit scene, and those of you who did not stay for that post-credit scene, you gotta check it out when it comes out on Blu-ray. It's pretty cool. Deadpool in a bathrobe, and he reveals that in part 2 we're gonna see Cable, so they better get somebody good to do Cable. But I thought Cable was gonna be an X-Force, but I guess they're gonna bring him in for Deadpool, or maybe they'll do both. I mean, who really knows? But what a great movie. I mean, again, it's not a perfect film. It's a little bit by the numbers. The plot is been told time and time again. It's a superhero movie with an edge. It is essentially an adult superhero movie. It is a movie for the demographic of people who grew up loving Marvel Comics in the 90s and loving Deadpool and waiting for a movie like this to finally get made, and now it has been made. So, check out Deadpool. High recommendation from me. Directed by Tim Miller, starring Ryan Reynolds. It is an extremely entertaining movie, maybe the most entertaining time I've had in the theater in years, probably since Guardians of the Galaxy. They're very similar, except this one has a lot more cursing. It's a blast. So have a good time watching the film. Thank you for watching my review, and I'm sure I'll come back with more thoughts once I see the film again, maybe do some more dissections of where they could go, maybe some theories. I really enjoyed it, though. Check it out, and if you have seen it, let me know in the comments down below, but please try not to put any spoilers in the comments for at least a week or so, because I want people who haven't seen the film, I don't want them to go into the comment section and be, be spoiled. So there's not too much to spoil. Like, the film has a very basic and kind of predictable plot. That is a con. It's not a perfect movie, but man, was it ballsy, and did they do a great job in entertaining you. And really, that's what a movie's supposed to do, is entertain. I'll catch you down the road.